Doctrine discussing this issue in detail, but no agreement has been reached regarding its position as a human right. However, there is some consensus about its functions as a provider of rights, since digital identity allows access and use of digital economy and society, as well as the exercise of important rights like freedom of expression or information. On the other hand, there is also the risk that some techniques, such as the biometric ones, may even violate certain human rights. Secondly, in the area of economy, the digital identity market has exceeded $20 billion in the recent years. Although the most remarkable point is that identity itself is promoted as the new money. On the other side, the idea of digital identity as a tool for exclusion or inclusion in areas such as humanitarian aid, refugees, or development in general is still under discussion and remains unsettled. Thirdly, from the point of view of security, criminality associated with digital identities such as phishing, fraud, or identity theft is constantly increasing, while the lack of reliable identification tools provides impunity for illicit acts. A secure and trusted identity is the cornerstone for cybersecurity in the digital world. Far from being a mere theoretical concept, digital identity is of great practical relevance for countries, organizations, business, and users. Despite its relevance in these and other significant areas, not only human rights, economy, or development, there is no agreement on the concept of digital identity. This is the second point I'm going to address. What is digital identity? The concept of digital identity has become the focus of much and complex debate. It has been conceived as the online version of physical identity. However, it is a more complicated topic. The analysis of institutional and academic practice reveals that there are up to 5 different approaches to this concept. Firstly, digital identity is defined through the idea of representation. This is the approach used by the USA National Institute of Standards and Technology. Secondly, digital identity is considered as information or as a sum of data or attribute. This is the kind of concept promoted by the Consultative Committee of the Data Protection Convention of the Council of Europe. Thirdly, there are also definitions linking the two previous options. According to the International Telecommunication Union, digital identity is the digital representation of the information known about a specific individual, group, or organization. Fourthly, we have a different view. Some authors, like Twitter, argue that digital identity is a mixture of individual determination and relational aspect. And finally, there are also other experts who consider that none of these definitions capture the general meaning of digital identity. Although they may look similar, there are relevant differences between all these different definitions. Definition based on the idea of representation or on the idea of data are very different consequences from a legal point of view. In the case of identity-related incident, could involve personal data, the legal regime is different from these cases in which digital identity is considered only like representation without taking into account information about people or data. At the end, there is no agreement on the concept, and without a common definition, it's also difficult to reach a consensus on how to manage digital identity. And that brings us to the next question: how digital identity has to be managed? When analyzing what happens in practice, we can see that the development of digital identity models has become a priority at both international and national level, as well as in both public and private fields. The two main approaches are biometric technology and credential model. Biometric is based on the verification of an element of the user's body, like fingerprints, face, or iris, for instance. Among the most famous cases of countries using this method are China and India. However, now, little by little, a growing number of countries all are also opting for the certainty and security of this methodology. Biometric tools have the potential to create trusted identities, but they also carry on a high degree of risk regarding fundamental freedoms because of their possible use for individual and social vigilance or political control. On the other hand, there are three main types of credential model: centralized, federated, and self-sovereign. According to the centralized model, each organization might be an identity provider, offering credentials to users in order to allow access to its services, typically through a username and a password. There are two main problems concerning this model. First, provider can obtain, store, and use the data, and even monetize, share, or sell this information to third parties. And the second problem is that users lack control over their own identities and have to use different credentials with each provider. The federated model, the second one, was designed to overcome this problem by allowing one credential to be used across several domains through a common provider. In this model, the user is redirected to be authenticated by an identity provider, such as Google or Facebook, among others, before accessing a services. Although it could be easier to deal with fewer credentials, we still have the same problem because user lacks control over their identity, and the identity provider can obtain, store, and even sell more information about the identity data of the user. Finally, the decentralized and self-sovereign models are the ones through which users may have full control over their identity because the system gives them the power to manage it without having to rely on external provider. With this model, users can use their own identities, even monetize them. Not external provider is required, and no third parties have access to the data of the users. Many countries and organizations are still supporting biometrics, and many providers are promoting centralized or federated credentials. Whatever model is chosen, one way or another, this system raises the use of commodification, and privatization of identity. In addition, they might pose a threat to basic human rights such as privacy or data protection. Self-sovereign identity seems to be the only way for digital identity protection as a right and its defense as a public good. And we arrive to the conclusions. Digital identity is indeed at the crossroad between globalization and sovereignty. In a globalized and transnational world, universal digital identity could be the best solution. In a world governed by sovereign state, such a model is, for the time being, clearly not viable. Digital identity is therefore a global problem that is not being and cannot be properly addressed as a global problem. There is no one universal system of digital identification. There is no global standard endorsed by a public authority that ensures legitimacy and compliance with law. Instead, the digital identity landscape is highly plural, private, and fragmented. Public actor and private provider compete in the supply of identity methods. Biometric, centralized, and federated models are quite different, but at the end of the day, they share the same problem. User identity data can become a commodity while human identity becomes part of the technological structure. Private corporation power over identity is a much deeper issue. There is also a huge problem concerning private or public political and social control through digital identification. In contrast, the decentralized model, the self-sovereign identity, offers a possibility of self-control by the user, which brings it nearer to the category of a right, and it also guarantees the exclusion of third parties, which bring it closer to the idea of public good. Although this model, the self-sovereign model, is advocated by the European Union, the OECD, and the International Communication Union, as well as other institutions and several states, not all countries and not all providers agree with this. This means that for the time being, different models of identification are going to coexist, thus requiring additional efforts to achieve interoperability and mutual recognition. This principle, interoperability and recognition, however, may help to solve the immediate problem of the coexistence of different regimes, but they do not solve the core problem of the different nature of digital identity as a right, a public good, or a commodity. Thank you very much. I'm looking forward if you have any question. Thank you.
Okay. Does anyone have any questions? Okay. Thank you very much, Hasnan Bukhari from University of Erfurt. First of all, thank you for laying out such a complicated topic in a very concise manner. And digital identity in the current wave of digitalization is indeed, as you have put it, a complicated and yet an important phenomenon. But I'm wondering about a couple of things. And you have put a question mark in the title of your paper, individual right, a public good, or just a commodity. And it's a very intriguing title. Now, in this wave of digitalization, perhaps you are covering that in your research, perhaps not, but you can correct me. in this wave of digitalization, we see that there are people who are increasingly becoming, how shall I say, fed up with the entire digital identity process, digitalization, being recorded, being a part of a certain spreadsheet somewhere in the cloud. And there is a movement which says that to withdraw from the digitalization. However, I don't think that that is possible. So, on one hand, we talk about a human right or an individual right. On the other hand, how about people who would not want to volunteer their biometrics, their particular digital identity, which has become a norm now, particularly in Europe? Now, when we look at these things, digital identity becomes a highly contested and a problematic, terrain where people are being forced into it. There are people who would like to have it because without it they are unable to move. That's they call it a right. But I'm just wondering, what about those people who probably would like to withdraw? Is there a possibility to withdraw from this, entire discipline as well? Just a thought.
Yeah, that
Thanks.
is a very, very interesting question. The fact is that on the one way, it's difficult to be out of digitalization because every service is going to be done through digital means. Even if you have to go to the medical hospital, the record are digitalized, and if you want to participate in economy, it's the same and everything. But is something like if people want to be out of that, there are countries in which it's possible, there are countries in which this is not possible. In the India Aadhaar system, it's a mandatory identification. It's something that they do with biometrics, and for the first time, India reached the point in which everyone has an identity, because there are even countries in which digital identity is not only the way to access services, it's only the way to have a legal status that allows you to access to humanitarian aid or something like that. This is also a problem with that, because you can use digital identity as a method for inclusion or for exclusion for identified people, no? There are some theories, very interesting theories, that said that at the end, the problem is the nationality, because if we create boundaries, we allow people to make exclusion or to make big thing with identity. There are other countries in which digital identity is something that is still voluntary. It's the case in the European Union with the regulation that has been just agreed between among the institutions in last November. We don't have the regulation published, but there is an agreement, and the European digital identity will be something voluntary for people. But voluntary is difficult to apply, because at the end you will need to use it. It's something very, very... Maybe I read somewhere that someone said that if we recognize digital identity as a right, maybe we can create a way to legally have the possibility to ask for responsibility if someone violates every concept or every aspect of your identity. So that's mean something at the end early. If you don't want to be controlled through digital identity, it's better to have digital identity in order to have the legal way to make a claim protecting your digital identity. But it's a very open debate still.
Any more questions? Or I'll check the live stream and see if there's anything. there isn't anything on the live stream. But we have 2 more minutes. Oh, we've got
Yeah.
If you allow me, since we still have time and the topic is so interesting, also just wanted to, not particularly related to your this particular research, but perhaps some insights. When Web 2.0 started, there was a wave of right to freedom of expression on the net, freedom to speak on the net, being anonymous on the net. And anonymity was and is one of the major factors, particularly for dissidents, particularly for people who are web activists or hacktivists or slacktivists. Now, within this particular field, we saw that what happened in the case of Twitter. You have to, there's now a way to, or perhaps now will become mandatory to verify yourself. That completely kills the idea of anonymity. I don't want to say that it's only Twitter that's doing that, but it's just one example, So within this field of hacktivism and web activism, the digital identity perhaps would present a threat to those who would like or would stay to choose to be anonymous.
Yeah, that's a very big problem because possibly the countries with have a more dictatorial political system are the countries that are imposing digital identity identification, or they are defending principle like the sovereignty principle over digital space. That is the contrary of the opposite of the anonymity of and the ideas of a free space with which we started with the declaration of Barlow and so on. No? So the fact is that the countries that respect the less the right are the countries more interested in making digital identity compulsory in order to control people. If they don't do it through digital identity, and when they do with biometric technology, they do with other means. And on the other side, the most democratic countries try to recognize digital identity in order to get access to everyone to the advantages of digital economy and society. This is even something very, very, it's a category, a polyhedric category with different lecture and different narratives. Can be one thing, a good thing, it can be a very bad thing. It depends of the use we did of it. It is like every technology. You can use for good or for bad. And democratic states are going to try to use in general in a good way, but the other one aren't. Okay. Thank you. Yeah.
time, but thank you so much.
Thank you very
It was
much.
really, really
everyone.
interesting
Thank
to
you.
look. Yeah.